Welcome to Whispers at Night. Can't sleep? Curl up and listen. I'll share quiet, eerie stories while the snow falls outside your window. Subscribe, join our little night crew, and hit like if you enjoy the chill. Ready? Let's begin. In late September of 2016, Elo and Hart landed in the Yukon, bound for a hamlet called Frosthaven. Fewer than 300 people lived there, tucked in a pine-choked valley about 140 miles from the nearest year-round highway and far beyond regular cell coverage. Elowen had signed a one-year contract to teach at the only school in town, a single long building with a playground that disappeared under snow by November. She told herself this would be the reset she needed. New mountains, new faces, no reminders of the divorce settlement and the rooms she had packed up alone. The float plane set down on a wind-ruffled lake and taxied toward a gravel ramp darkened by early dusk. The pilot, Gus Malley, helped drag her bags onto the skids. He was a lean man with ropey forearms and a sunburn that looked permanent. He asked if she'd ever lived this far north through winter. She said she hadn't, but she was excited. He nodded without warmth and told her Frosthaven was decent, so long as you worked hard and kept your nose out of what didn't concern you. He said it like a weather report. A woman in a red parka waved from an old municipal pickup at the end of the ramp. "Ms. Hart?" she called. "I'm Irina Volkova, principal. Hop in. Please." She spoke softly and didn't quite smile. They drove a rutted track past a shuttered fish plant, past a low church, past houses on pilings with oil tanks crouched beside them like fat, rusted animals. The air smelled like spruce and diesel. The mountains formed a jagged rim around everything. When they reached a simple cabin on the edge of the settlement, Irina showed Elowen the generator shed, the stack of split wood, the big blue water barrel. "Fill the stove before bed," Irina said. "Keep a headlamp by the door. Don't wander off trails after dark. We've had a sow and 2 cubs near the dump." She set a photocopied sheet on the table. Numbers for the clinic, the RCMP detachment 2 flights away, the hamlet office. At the door, she paused and added, "I know people will be friendly, but it's best to avoid Thursday nights around the old hall. It's a town matter. We don't bring outsiders." Then she left. Elowen unpacked, made tea on the propane stove, and listened to the generator thrumming through the floor. The quiet between the thrum and the wind had a weight to it she hadn't expected. She told herself it was just the first night nerves of any big change. The first weeks were busy enough that she slept hard. She had 15 students combined, grades 6 through 8, in a room decorated with faded northern wildlife posters. The kids were polite, almost formal. They stood when she entered. They said yes ma'am and no ma'am. They completed assignments with neat handwriting, but they guarded themselves. Even the chatter at lunch seemed edited. When she asked casual questions, "Who's your best friend? What do you like to do after school?" the answers were thin. "Trapping with my uncle. Skating when the ice comes in. Helping at the store?" Nevermore, she noticed bruises. Not one big terrible bruise, but small patterns. Oval marks on forearms, dark smudges near knees, lines across shins. "Kids knock into things," Irina said when Elowen mentioned it. "We're always on ice or metal stairs. You'll get used to it." The words were calm. The message beneath felt like a wall. By mid-October, the daylight pinched down to a handful of hours. Everyone moved faster during those hours. Haul water, split wood, check traps, get it done while the light is there. On 3 Thursdays in a row, Elowen noticed the same thing. Snow machines and trucks parking nose to nose outside the old community hall. Adults went in and didn't come out for hours. No kids, no voices. A dull, steady glow behind blacked-out windows. She asked a 7th grader named Maya, a quiet girl who worked like a grown woman and watched the room with big, alert eyes, what the meetings were. Maya's face drained a little. "Council," she said. "Boring. Just talk." She looked away and pressed her lips together like she had to hold something in her mouth. On the first Thursday of November, the wind dropped and the air turned knife still. Elowen cooked a pot of lentils, put the rest in the snow to cool, and told herself to watch one meeting from a distance, then stop. If it was truly just council business, she could put curiosity down. If it wasn't, she wanted to know what she was living among. She wore her parka and a dark hat kept to shadows along the firebreak and approached the back of the hall where the earth sloped up to a small window. Frost feathered the corners of the glass. She cupped her hands and peered in. There were more people than she'd expected. Nearly every adult in town ringed around an open space like a well. In that space sat a teenage boy, rope around his wrists, head bowed. She recognized him from the schoolyard in the afternoons when he came to fetch his sister, Cade Dorn. His uncle Caleb ran the general store. Caleb stood at the front with a knife in his hand, the blade dull from use, not ceremony. People were chanting softly. The words weren't English, weren't French. They weren't any language she knew, and she knew a few. Elowen's throat went cold. She opened her mouth to shout. A gloved hand clamped over it from behind. She was yanked backward so fast she stumbled into snow. A voice breathed into her ear, steady and urgent. "Don't you make a sound." It was Irina. "If you want to see morning, come with me and keep your head down." They moved low along a line of half-buried boats and fuel drums, cut across the lane and slipped into the trees. Only when they were 100 yards from the cabin did Irina let go. Inside, she barred the door, pulled the curtains, and stood with her hands flat on the table. "I told you not to go near there," she said softly. "Now you've put me in a position." "I saw a child tied to a chair," Elowen said. Her voice sounded small in the cabin. "With a knife. Cade is nearly 17, Irina said. "And he volunteered. For what?" "For what keeps us alive," Irina said. "You are a teacher. Teach. Do not try to fix a place you don't know. That's not an answer." "It is the only one you're getting," Irina said, and her face, always tired, hardened. "Here are the choices. You act as if you saw nothing and you will be safe. You attempt to leave or to tell someone, and you will be missed in the spring thaw. That is not a threat from me, Ms. Hart. It is a fact about this place. I don't want that for you. So finish your contract, go south. Forget Frosthaven. What happened to the teacher before me?" Irina's eyes closed for a long beat. "She decided to hike out in January," she said. "Wandered off the flagged trail. They found her when the ravens did." Irina lifted the bar, stepped outside, and was gone into the soft squeak of cold snow. Elowen did not sleep. She fed the stove every hour on the hour, and watched the curtain seams for light or movement. She thought about taking the satellite phone from its drawer and calling the RCMP number. But she imagined how long it would take anyone to come, and what the town might do if a chopper tried to set down at night with people watching from the spruce. She set the phone back in the drawer and pressed her hands to her eyes. She had come here for quiet. The quiet here had edges. Cade came back to school 3 days later with a bandage beneath his sleeve and a face that seemed older than his age. He ate little at lunch. He didn't speak. He looked past Elowen like she was a window on a view he didn't care for. His sister, Maya's friend, clung to him until the bell, then ran out with wet lashes and her hood up. Elowen told herself she could gather evidence. Photographs, names, dates. She could get it all into safe hands once she got out. That plan kept her steady for 2 weeks. She graded papers. She taught fractions. She did not look toward the hall on Thursdays. Then, near the end of November, she cut across the square at dusk and heard a sound that made her legs unlock and carry her to the old hall without thinking. It was a woman's sound, the raw, open-throat cry you only hear in delivery rooms or in the moment after a body hits the ground. The door wasn't latched. She pushed it. The heat and smell hit her, sweat, iron, wood smoke. People stood in a semicircle. On the floor, Lisa Perot, whose daughter drew careful pictures of foxes in Elowen's class, cradled a swaddled infant. The baby made a mewling noise. A small hand flailed from the cloth. The fingers were fused. Caleb Dorn stood over Lisa with the same knife, the same blank set of jaw. "We have the vote," he said. "You know what we are." Lisa sobbed and rocked. "Please," she said. "She's ours. We all pay or we all starve," Caleb said. "You asked to live here. You signed. We are not cruel. We are exact," someone saw Elowen. A murmur went through the room like wind through dead grass. Irina reached her fast. "Out," she told Elowen in a voice that wasn't soft anymore. "Go home right now." Elowen backed away and ran. She vomited in the snow next to her steps and stayed on her knees until the cold bit through her jeans. There was nothing to call this except what it was. They had rules for who counted. They had rules for who was fed. They had rules for what was carried into the trees. She couldn't wait for spring. She couldn't wait for a contract to end. If she was going to leave, it had to be while flight still came in on clear mornings and the lake could still take skis. She waited for Gus's next supply run and caught him at the ramp before anyone else reached him. "I need out," she said, and her voice shook with a fear she hadn't let herself feel until then. "I'll pay double. I won't say why. Just take me." Gus studied her face like he was looking for frostbite. "Tomorrow dawn," he said finally. "If I'm not there, you don't try again the same day. Do you understand? They'll be watching. Go home now. Act normal." She nodded and walked away like she had asked about more kerosene. That night she lit no lamps. She packed what she could carry in one small pack and hid it beneath the bed. She sat in her coat with the stove door open and waited for the darkest part to pass. Before the first gray lifted over the eastern ridge, she left her cabin and took the long way round the dump to the lake. Her breath plumed, her eyelashes prickled with frost. From the trees she watched the far edge of the ice. Gus's de Havilland loped onto the surface and turned its nose toward the ramp. She broke cover and ran. They were airborne before the first snow machines reached the shore. From the air, the town was a small geometry of roofs and trails and smoke. Elowen watched it recede until it was only a dark seam bordering a white page. Gus flew low, following a river like a vein. For a long time, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost conversational. "You're doing the right thing for you," he said. "You won't do the right thing for them. Can't. There's too many places like this between here and the coast. Some call themselves collectives. Some call themselves congregations. Same ledger, different words." "You know," Elowen said. "It wasn't a question. I drop fuel. I haul mail. I hear what I'm not supposed to hear," Gus said. "You want to tell the Mounties, tell them. You'll make a noise. Might shake a few trees. It won't change the forest." Elowen stared at the plane's rivets until they blurred. She didn't tell the police. She didn't write an op-ed. She moved to Prince George, took a position at a public school, rented a basement suite, and told herself the kids here needed her attention today, not the ghosts of a far valley. When she woke shaking at night, she pressed her palms over her eyes until the pressure made phosphines bloom like sparks. In January, a parcel arrived with no return address. Inside was a child's drawing, orange crayon foxes under a blue sky. The paper smelled faintly like wood smoke. In the corner, block letters. "Thank you, Miss Hart. No name, no town. Just the drawing." She kept it in a folder in a locked drawer. Sometimes, just before sleep, she tried to arrange the facts a different way, to imagine there had been a misunderstanding, a fever dream, a cultural rite misread by an outsider with too much fear and too little context. Then she remembered the sound in the hall, the fused fingers, Irina's tired face, Cade's downcast eyes, Caleb's knife, the choices. In the Yukon winter of 2016 on Thursday nights, the old hall filled and the windows stayed dark. Somewhere in that circle, a ledger was kept current with hands and votes and old words that weren't any language she knew. Somewhere, a narrow rule made room for another month of heat and full cupboards, made room by making less room for someone else. Elowen taught verbs and fractions and how to write a fair paragraph. She smiled into faces that weren't guarding themselves from her, and it felt like treason to feel relief. She turned the page in her attendance book each week and watched the lines carry on like nothing had ever twisted them. On the last day of the school year, she stayed late, erasing the whiteboard until it squeaked. The janitor propped the door, and a cool breeze moved through, smelling like cut grass and rain. A girl lingered in the doorway, too old to be in her class. Dark hair, watchful eyes. For a second, frost and spruce filled Elowen's tongue, and she was back in a different doorway. Then the girl stepped out of the shadow, and the spell broke. "You drop this," the girl said, and handed Elowen a folded scrap, one of Elowen's list pages that must have fallen from her planner. The girl's smile was small and plain. "Not guarded, not blank. Thanks," Elowen said. And when she looked down at the paper, there was a second scrap tucked beneath it. A torn note, handwriting she recognized from the fox drawing. "Be safe, Miss Hart. It's okay you left." She looked up fast, but the doorway was empty. She walked home through early evening, past houses with barbecues smoking, past kids on bikes and parents on steps. The simple goodness of it hurt and healed at the same time. She unlocked her basement suite and stood for a long time in the stillness that had no edge to it anymore. There are things that grow only where the soil is poor and the wind is cruel. There are towns you cannot fix without destroying them. There are ledgers written in frost that look like order until you read the names. Owen doesn't know how to live with all of that yet. She only knows she will not miss another child's bruise. She will not ignore another strange Thursday wherever she finds herself. And if anyone ever asks her for a ride out, she will drive through the night. Somewhere far north, beyond a chain of lakes and a shoulder of dark mountains, Thursday is coming again, and the old hall will fill. Owen won't be there. The fact doesn't comfort her. It doesn't condemn her either. It just sits beside her like the quiet after the generator shuts off. The moment when you hear every other sound the world makes, and have to decide which ones you can live with. Rowan Inlet didn't show up on many maps. It sat along a crooked lake in the Northwest Territories, 45 miles from the nearest gravel road that stayed open all year, and even that was a rumor when the snow came early. On July 10, 2018, photographer named Owen Hartley got off a float plane there with 2 hard cases of camera gear and a plan to spend 3 weeks shooting summer light for a Calgary travel magazine. He was 28, wiry from miles on trails in Utah and Montana, always hunting the next ridgeline, the next river bend that felt untouched. He figured the remoteness would help him make pictures nobody else had. The pilot pushed off and taxied away. The lake swallowed the engine's noise until all Owen could hear was insects and a wind moving through black spruce. A couple of kids watched from the dock. Across the lane stood the only lodge in town, a 2-story building with 8 rooms, a small cafe, and a bar with antlers over the door. The sign read Laurel Lake Lodge in hand-painted letters that had faded to the color of toast. The owners were a married pair, Dale and Maren Whitlock. Dale was a big man in his 50s with a beard so thick it looked like it could stop a bug at full speed. Maren moved quieter and saw more. It was obvious right away. They checked Owen into a second-floor room with a view of the single street. A general store, a fuel shed, the post office, and houses on pilings. Rowan Inlet was home to just under 400 people in summer. It felt like a place that held together because everyone agreed to hold it. For a week, nothing felt off. Owen hiked out each morning with a sandwich and a lightweight tripod, and came home in the blue hour with cards full of sky, river, and trees. The sun hung long and low. He shot salmon flashing in tea-colored water, white wildflowers against dark muskeg, a thunderhead that rolled across the lake like an animal. He ate at the cafe, swapped a few stories over a beer at the bar, and learned enough names to be polite. The mechanic who kept everything with an engine running. The nurse who flew in twice a week. The guide who didn't talk unless you asked him something simple. Folks answered questions about trails and weather, and where to avoid fresh bear scat. But nobody volunteered more than they had to. That didn't bother Owen. Places like this guarded themselves. On July 16th, he said to Dale that he wanted to see Crow's Mouth Chasm, a narrow cut about 13 kilometers north, that some trapper at the bar had said was worth the climb. Dale's face changed at the name. He told Owen the ground up there broke ankles, the moss hid holes, and the creek ran deeper than it looked. It's fine country to look at from a distance, he said. It's bad country to walk in. Owen smiled the way confident hikers do. He said he had a satellite messenger, spare batteries, and enough sense to turn around if things got weird. Dale didn't smile back. He wiped a clean glass anyway. If you're set on it, he said, leave your route on the desk. At 6 the next morning, Owen left a note with his plan, shouldered a day pack, and told Maren to save him whatever the special was. She'd mentioned a pot roast. She nodded and watched him cross the lane and disappear into the trees at the north end of town. That was the last time anyone could say for sure they saw him. He didn't come back for dinner. At 10, Maren told Dale. Dale said the young man probably found a ridge he liked and pitched his tent. At noon the next day, when there was still no sign, Maren called the RCMP detachment hours away by plane. Constable Eli Mercer flew in mid-afternoon with a duffel and a simple plan. Get healthy volunteers, push a broad line north, and keep it moving. A dozen men raised their hands. Dale was one. The quiet guide, Silas Novak, was another. Mercer looked relieved. Untrained city help would have been a liability in that bush. They left at dawn on July 18th, spread wide where they could, kept within a whistle where they couldn't, and tried to ride the high ground when the land let them. Radio contact came and went as the terrain dictated. The country was the kind that made small errors big. Spruce roots hid in the moss. Water cut the ground where it wanted. The mosquitoes didn't care what the plan was. Late in the afternoon, Silas's team came up on the south mouth of the chasm, where a faint trail ran out of steam. On a flat rock beside the path sat a gray backpack like somebody had rested it neatly and stepped away for a minute. Mercer got there fast. He opened the pack. Inside was Owen's wallet, the satellite messenger. 3 bars, a full water bottle, filter, and his main camera with an extra card in a case. Everything you'd take for a long day. Everything you'd keep close if you were going farther. Mercer powered the messenger. The last ping showed 09:42 a.m. the day Owen walked out. The device logged that exact rock as its last point, then nothing. Whoever stopped it had pressed the power button on purpose, or held it long enough to force a shutdown. Either way, it wasn't an accident. Maybe he set the pack down to shoot and wandered, Silas said. His voice had no color to it. Maybe, Mercer said, but it didn't sit right. Owen wasn't the type to ditch water and food on purpose. You don't turn off your lifeline when you're new to ground that can twist under you. They tightened the search around the place where the pack had been. For 3 days they combed ridges, creek banks, deadfall, side draws, and the chasm itself, where the water shouldered through slick rock. They found nothing. No track, no snagged cloth, no slide marks where a body might have gone wrong. The dog team that flew in from Yellowknife hit on Owen's scent at the lodge, then dragged the handlers straight to the rock where the pack had been and went in circles, whining. They couldn't find a direction beyond that point. It was as if Owen's trail ended at a waist-high slab of granite and didn't begin again on the other side. On July 22nd, Mercer sat on the lodge's back steps and spoke with an old woman who lived alone near the fuel shed. Her name was Ruth. She'd watched summers stack on top of each other until they blurred. When he asked what people called Crow's Mouth Chasm years back, she looked toward the timber and shook her head. Hungry place, she said. Always was. Outsiders go up there and don't come back. One in 88, a forestry man. Girl in 96 with a giant backpack and tiny legs. A biologist in 2005. A guide from down south in 2014, though some of us don't count him as an outsider. She tipped her head toward the trees. You can search until the flies carry you off. The hills keep what they want. Mercer checked what he could check. There were small files in government archives that matched what Ruth said. No conclusions, just ended lines and a list of items left in odd places. Boots neatly side by side on a stump. A tent pitched and tight with nobody inside. A field notebook with 3 pages torn out. A rifle leaned against a rock, unloaded. Cartridges laid in a tidy ring like someone with time and intention had placed them one by one. On July 24th, one of the teams found a clearing in the trees 2 miles north of where Owen's backpack had been. It was wrong the moment they stepped into it. The land had been scraped bare years ago, or beaten into hard earth by feet. Nothing grew. A ring of stones marked its edge. In the center stood a cairn about waist-high with flat stones, placed like someone cared about symmetry. On top of the cairn sat a camera. Owen's second body. Wasn't dirty. It wasn't wet. It looked like someone had set it down gently and walked away. Mercer turned it on. He thumbed through the files. The early pictures were what you'd expect. Trail, light in trees. A hand-sized waterfall where the creek tumbled under a log. Then 3 frames with the same timestamp. Aero 9:57 a.m. July 17th. The first showed the very clearing they were standing in. Empty. The cairn in the middle, the ring of stones around it. The second showed 12 figures around the cairn. The faces were hidden under hoods or shadowed by hats. They stood evenly spaced like they'd done it before. The exposure was perfect. Whoever took it knew how to work light. Mercer counted twice to make sure. 12. The third frame was a mess, motion blurred and too close. Hands reached toward the lens. A pale shape behind them might have been a face or might have been a trick the blur played. You could stare at it and see both. Mercer turned to Silas. How did the camera end up on the cairn if his pack was 2 miles that way? Silas shrugged. Maybe he carried it. Maybe the wind kept him from hearing us call. His jaw worked when he saw the second image. A small tell he probably didn't know he had. Mercer tucked that away. He took the camera back to the lodge and called a meeting. People filled the cafe. Kids stood on the stairs. He explained what they'd found. He showed the 3 photos on a laptop screen and asked for help. He said he didn't care about gossip or old stories. He needed names and he needed them now. If you know who these people are, he said, tapping the hooded ring with a knuckle, this is when you tell me. Nobody spoke. Chairs creaked. Dale stood finally and talked like he was reading something off a card. Yes, that looked like some old site. No, he didn't know who those folks were. Maybe they were visitors from another community. Maybe the camera timestamp was off. Maybe Owen had fallen into the creek or decided to keep walking and just walked until he couldn't. We're sorry he's gone, Dale said. But you can't turn a hungry landscape into a murder case because you're angry you didn't find a man. Mercer stared at him. Dale looked at the floor. Without more, there wasn't a judge in the territory who'd sign a warrant. On July 27th, the official search ended. The file moved from active to open. The float plane took Mercer out in the same long light Owen had loved. He didn't let it go. He pulled land records at his desk in Yellowknife. The clearing sat within a square of bush that had stayed in one family's hands since before the border lines were tidy. The name on the file was Novak. He wrote the affidavit the best way he knew how. Artifacts found, sequence of images, land ownership, prior disappearances, patterns that didn't add up. The Crown prosecutor read it and slid it back. You've got a circle of people in hoods and a story old folks tell, she said. You don't have probable cause. Mercer called a friend in Calgary, who knew a friend in private investigations. They put a small trail camera in a nest of spruce off the clearing's edge, and checked it by satellite, when they could afford the time. On July 17th the next year, at 04:12 in the morning, the camera caught a single figure. Hood up, same line of stones, same cairn in the middle. The figure set a small bouquet of wildflowers on the flat top and left without looking up. It felt like a ritual that had settled into itself so deeply, it didn't notice being seen. Owen's mother kept his camera in a drawer she opened when the house was too quiet. She'd look at the 3 images and press the heel of her hand against her mouth and try to turn blur into answers. The travel magazine put out a statement, then a small fundraiser to help cover the cost of searches, then moved on. The RCMP file collected neat notes and loose ends and a list of dates. Mercer started sleeping less. He took early retirement the following December and moved south where the sunset smudged the sky red and there was nothing dark enough to hold a memory for long. Rowan. Inlet stayed the same size from a plane window. The lodge's sign didn't get repainted. Dale kept pouring coffee and polishing glasses that didn't need it. Marin put stew on the stove and told travelers to sign the hiking log and carry more water than they thought they needed. Silas guided hunters where the caribou moved like a slow river, and when he passed the north trailhead with clients, he didn't look toward the timber that led to Crow's Mouth. He would stop sometimes, tie a bootlace and let the party walk a few paces ahead before he followed. A woman from Ontario came through the next summer and asked about the photographer who went missing. She said she'd read something online and wanted to see the place where it happened. Dale told her Rowan Inlet wasn't a zoo. People live here, he said, and turned away to refill another cup. Ruth sat on her steps and watched the lake breathe. If someone asked, she would say what she always said. Some places take. They don't need a reason. They don't owe one. Outsiders come with their plans and their maps and their bright shirts, and sometimes the country just says no. She would also say there are things people do in hard places to stay alive, and it's not for her to put anybody else's practice in the paper. On the morning of July 17th, a kid on a bike rode to the chasm trailhead and laid a blade of grass across the signpost. He'd been told once to do that for travelers who went too far. The wind took the grass by noon. None of this explains what happened to a pack set neatly on a rock, device pressed off by a human thumb, a camera left on a cairn like a gift, 12 figures holding still in a circle, and hands reaching toward glass in the instant before a shutter fell. It doesn't explain why some lines refuse to connect. Even when you put every fact in the right order, the magazine keeps a page up with a short note about Owen. His mother still offers a reward for information that doesn't come. The trail camera in the spruce sends one image a year if the batteries hold. A person in a hood, flowers on stone, dawn looking on without comment. If you fly over Rowan Inlet on a clear day, the lake shines like a coin, and the line of timber north of town looks like a seam stitched too tight. Somewhere along that seam, a narrow cut holds cold water and rock. If you go anyway, because people always do, you'll find the first mile easy and the second a little harder. You'll feel watched only because everything living up there has learned to watch. You'll tell yourself stories to keep your feet moving the right way. You'll remember that one photo with the blur and the hands and think, I won't be the one who ignores a warning. Then you'll push on because summer is short, and the light is good, and you came a long way to see it for yourself. What happened to Owen Hartley may be a crime people decided not to name. It may be a ritual with rules outsiders don't get to read. It may be a hole in the world the shape of a man. Maybe all three. What lives in the chasm doesn't have to pick, and Rowan Inlet goes on. Summer fish runs, winter wood piles, hockey on black ice. People keep each other fed and warm. They gather when the float plane lands and when the float plane goes. On some early morning each July, before the lake lifts its fog, somebody in a hood walks a quiet trail and sets wildflowers on a stone. Then they turn for home, because there is coffee on, because there is work to be done, because life here only holds if you hold it. Rena Calder moved to St. Brin's Cove for quiet, and found out one neighbor was plenty noise. By her second dawn in the tiny Newfoundland fishing town, stranger knew her schedule, her weak door latch, and how easily a kind smile can hide a bad hobby. She landed there in March 2017, after losing her job in St. John's. The apartment went next. A friend of a friend mentioned a cheap place on the Bonavista Peninsula, 200 people, a fish plant, a store, a bar, if the weather behaved. The rent was $600 a month. The road to the house turned to packed gravel and then to ruts. Her phone dropped to no service a mile before the last turn. The house was small but workable. Wood stove for heat, propane generator for lights, well water that tasted like a penny, drafty windows, creaky floors, a shed full of mismatched junk. The nearest roofline sat past a thin stand of spruce, maybe 200 yards off, with a satellite dish pointed at the sky and a clean pickup in the drive. She told herself the isolation would be good for her. Stack wood, make soup, sleep. On day 2, the neighbor knocked. He stood far enough back to look polite and held out a parcel of wrapped cod like a welcome card. Nolan Carr, he said. Mid-40s, lean, gray showing at the temples. Quiet voice, steady eyes. If you need anything, holler. Out here, we mind each other. He showed her how to set the stove damper so the fire wouldn't burp smoke into the room. He pointed to a low hill where you could sometimes steal a single bar of service if the wind wasn't chewing at you. He kept his visit short. She liked that. For a few weeks it went the way it should. Rena picked up a few shifts gutting and packing when the plant called. She learned which mornings the road grader came through and which ones you were on your own. Nolan waved from his porch. He brought one more fish the next week, then left her be. Then little things. A mug sitting on the wrong counter. A sweater moved from a chair to the back of the couch. A paperback on the nightstand open to a page she hadn't reached. She blamed herself, tired, distracted, trying to adjust. Early April, she woke to muddy boot prints on the kitchen floor. They came in from the back door, crossed the lino, paused just outside her bedroom, then walked back out the way they came. The door was locked when she checked it. The chain was still set. The prints weren't hers. Her hands shook while she wiped them up. She walked the spruce path and knocked on Nolan's door. "See anyone around my place last night?" she asked. He frowned, the careful kind. "Didn't notice," he said. "Could be animal. You'd be surprised how a mess looks like a boot if you're spooked." "An animal turned the knob and wiped its feet," she said. He lifted his shoulders. "I'll keep an eye." On her way back, she looked down at his steps and the clods of drying mud there. His boots were big. Most men's boots are. She told herself not to jump. That night, she wedged a chair under the back door handle and slept with a kitchen knife under the pillow. Wind pushed the siding. The stove ticked as it cooled. She didn't sleep much. In the morning, the chair was still in place. She made coffee. When she glanced toward Nolan's place, he was already on his porch, hands around a mug, looking right at her window. He lifted his hand in a small wave. Felt like a dare. More things went wrong in small ways. Footsteps on the porch boards late. A slow circle and pause. Scratches at the bedroom window like someone testing the latch. Mail torn open by the time it reached her box. Twice she came back from town to find the front door unlocked. Though she remembered the click of the deadbolt before she'd left. She told the town's part-time constable, a retired deckhand named Jerry Pike, who kept a desk in the fire hall. He listened, nodded, told her to get better locks and maybe a dog. First winter alone is rough, he said. Plays with your head. He meant well, but he didn't believe her. Rena walked back out into the cold and decided to stop asking nicely. She took a wide photo of her living room on her phone. She placed the coffee table with the long side exactly 1 hand's width from the rug edge. She tucked the blanket's corner under the second couch cushion. She angled a dining chair just so. Then she locked up, took the long walk to the store, and made herself stay away for 2 hours. When she came back, she shot the same photo from the same spot. The coffee table sat 3 inches to the left. The flipped cushion showed the fabric seam running the wrong way. And there, on the kitchen counter, a sheet of printer paper with 1 word written neat as a school test. Watching, heat rushed to her face. Anger first, then fear. She marched straight to Nolan's door, pounded until he opened and held the page up. "What is this?" she said. He read it, eyebrows up like he'd never seen paper before. "I don't know," he said. "Could be your landlord's old key floating around. Could be one of the lads from the plant being a fool. You're the only one who knows my schedule," she said. He considered that. "Everyone here knows everyone's schedule," he said. He handed back the note like it might smudge him. "You look tired, Rena. Paranoia makes a person see patterns. Maybe take a day in town." The way he said paranoia made her feel small. She turned away. He smiled, a tiny private twitch, as if they had shared a joke. She called the landlord from the hill where service sometimes appeared. He answered from an office in St. John's, apologetic and busy. Only 2 keys, he swore, one with him, one with her. He could mail a new lock set. No, he didn't think he'd given a copy to anyone else. "You're not the first single renter there," he said almost to himself. "Last girl left sudden, 4 in the morning. Never even asked for her deposit back. What was her name?" Rena asked. "Teresa," he said after a pause. "No, Tessa Ray. Thought she was moving to Halifax. Number I had for her doesn't work." Rena ended the call with the lock set promised and a cold feeling in her gut. She went home and searched directories when the signal held still. She tried old posts, tagged photos, friends of friends. On the 3rd night, she found a Tessa Ray working at a bookstore in Dartmouth, and an email address buried in an event page. Tessa wrote back the same evening. Yes, she'd lived in that house. Yes, she'd left in the dark. Yes, the neighbor's name had been Nolan. They spoke the next morning. Tessa's voice shook. "He starts nice," Tessa said. "Fixes a hinge, brings fish, tells you where to stand for a phone call. Then it's the soft stuff. Things moved, doors found open, notes. He'll stand in the trees. He likes you to see him and then look away like you imagined it. He told people I was fragile, that word. They believed him. Everyone likes Nolan. He helps with the Lions Club suppers and the Santa parade. He tells the plant manager who needs an extra shift. He knows everyone's cousins." "Did you go to the police?" Rena asked. "RCMP out of Clarenville," Tessa said. They were kind on the phone. Said it's hard to prove and harder to get anyone out there quick. "Is there a threat?" they asked. "A real one?" By then I couldn't sleep. He stood in my bedroom doorway one night. Didn't say a word. I yelled and he walked away. I packed a bag and left before sunrise. I mailed the key. I've never been back. Rena pressed her fingers hard into her eyes when they hung up. She counted slow. When she stopped, the room was the same and the problem was the same. She changed the locks and added a bar to each window latch. She stuck a dowel in the tracks. She set a cheap camera inside the entrance pointed at the door. She started keeping a log, time out, time in, anything off. She told the plant she couldn't take swings that ended at midnight and walked home before dark. Nolan stayed polite. He waved. He asked once if she wanted help hauling wood. She said no and shut the door. That night, the porch boards creaked at 2 in the morning. Slow circles. A pause at the bedroom window. She lay still, phone screen dark in her hand. Thumb on the flashlight icon, waiting for a knock that didn't come. 2 days later, she came home from town and found a small square of tape stuck low on the back door jamb, covered by the weather strip. It peeled off in her hand with a soft hush. A simple tell. If the tape was broken, someone had opened the door. She hadn't put it there. He had. He wanted her to know he could tell when she left. She took the camera card to the hill and thumbed through frames as the wind knifed at her coat. Dozens of still shots. The door, the rug edge, the strip of light at the bottom. Then at 11:13 a.m., a hand in the edge of the frame. Not a full face. Not enough to show anyone a photo and win a case. Just a hand. A scar across the knuckles. Clean nails. A plain silver band. She closed her eyes and saw Nolan's hand lift his mug on the porch. The same shallow scar. The constable said it wasn't proof. You can't swear to a hand, he said. Could be anybody. Could be you set it up wrong. He suggested a camera outside. He suggested motion lights. He didn't offer to come sit on the road at 2 a.m. Rena tried one more thing. She printed a letter and dropped it through Nolan's mail slot. It said simply, "Leave me alone." It said she had photos and a log and would call the RCMP again. It said she had a friend expecting a call from her every night at 9, and that friend would call for help if the call didn't come. She didn't really have that friend, not one who would keep it up every night. But she sent a message to an old co-worker anyway, and asked her to set an alarm for a week. That night, the porch boards were silent. In the morning, there was a new note in her kitchen, laid neat beside the stove like a breakfast placemat. Liar. She left the note on the table and sat on the floor with her back to the cabinets until the light in the window changed. In St. Brin's Cove, people take care of their own. It's a good thing when their own includes you. It is not good when it doesn't. At the plant, she felt the shift. 2 workers who had been easy with her went stiff. One woman told her in a kind voice, "Just keep your head down, love. He's been here his whole life." It wasn't a warning so much as a rule. She called Tessa again. "Leave," Tessa said. "Pack what you can carry. Don't say goodbye. Don't think you can fix it. He won't stop." Rena had wanted to be the person who didn't run. She wanted to show someone a photo, say a few true sentences and be believed. But she also wanted to sleep a full night with both eyes closed. She chose sleep. She packed a backpack, 1 change of clothes, a folder of papers, the camera card, photo albums. No, leave them. The generator keys too. The landlord's lock set lay unopened on the table. She left it there. She wrote a short note and taped it to the inside of the door. Keys on table, keep the deposit. She waited until 2 in the morning and then stepped into the cold. No moon. The spruce held the wind back just enough. She cut across the knoll instead of taking the driveway. At the top of the hill, she looked back at Nolan's house. One window had a thin glow, blue-white like a TV paused on a menu. The highway wasn't a highway. It was the road that eventually met one. She walked until first light made the ditch snow go gray instead of black. A seafood truck slowed, the driver squinting at her through the windshield, then pulled over without questions. "St. John's?" he asked. "Anywhere with a bus," she said. He nodded. "Hop in." By noon, she was in Clarenville with a coffee that didn't taste like well water. By nightfall, she was sleeping on a friend's couch in town. She filed a report with the RCMP the next day. Harassment, unlawful entry, stalking. They took it, stamped it, gave her a number. Without a face, without a name on a video, without neighbors willing to say the quiet part out loud, the paper sat. It's a big province. People go missing in the woods and in stories. Rena stayed in St. John's. She found 2 part-time jobs that paid less than 1 full-time job and worked both. She learned to like traffic noises again. She kept the stove smell in her hair longer than she wanted to. Some nights, the silence in her apartment felt like a dropped plate that never stopped ringing. It faded. Every so often, she checked the rental listings and saw the house come up again. "Cozy Outport Home," the ad said. "Great for singles. 600. A month later, the ad would be marked, "Let. Life goes on." She thought about warning whoever came next. She drafted emails to the landlord that she never sent. She considered posting in a local group and didn't. Small towns read like family trees. You don't light a match in a dry forest and act surprised. Instead, she called Tessa on October 31st, just because the date felt like something you should check on. They talked about books and the way the ocean smells different in different places. They didn't say Nolan's name. Sometimes Rena dreams of the kitchen floor. In the dream, the boot prints stop farther into the house each night. In the dream, the last one ends at the side of her bed and doesn't turn around. In St. Bryn's Cove, Nolan still stands on his porch with a mug in his hand. He still helps at the suppers. He still fixes things for the people who ask. When a new tenant moves into the house at the end of the road, he walks down with a fillet wrapped in paper and says, "If you need anything, holler." People make monsters into stories that look like wolves or ghosts. Most of them are just men with time and privacy and a talent for being believed. In the right kind of quiet, they don't need to raise a voice or a fist. They can push you out with a smile. Rena buys door bars for friends now. She tells them not to ignore the little things. She answers every late call. When someone says, "He's nice," she says, "Okay, but keep notes. If she ever drives the peninsula again, she won't turn down that road. She will pass the sign, past the spruce, past the gravel. She will keep both hands on the wheel and watch the water, wide and cold, and let the town fold itself back into the trees behind her." By the time November settled over Calic Bay, Nunavut, people stopped asking when the sun would come back and started counting days in cups of tea. The winter of 2016-2017 ran colder and darker than most anyone there could remember. Thermometers stuck at 45. Snow drifted up to windowsills and stayed. Generators coughed. Dogs refused to leave their kennels. The town had about 260 people, and nearly all of them knew each other by name. That's how it is in a place that far off the road map. You notice when someone isn't where they're supposed to be. That winter, 3 people disappeared. One in December, one in January, one in early March. No tracks. No scene to read. No reason that anyone could agree on. Folks still talk about it, but only when they're sure the doors are shut and the radio is off. The first was Rowan Keegan. He was 40 and worked on anything with a motor. Ski-doos, water pumps, the clinic's little generator, the loader down at the fuel dock. If something stopped, Rowan got it going again. He lived alone in a small house on the south side of town, past the school, with a yellow porch light that burned most nights. On December 9th, 2016, Rowan left the rec hall just after 9. He'd fixed the stove there earlier and stayed to have a coffee and talk hockey. It was a short walk home. He'd done it hundreds of times. The wind had died for once and the snow was new enough to squeak under your boots. He didn't make it back. In the morning, when he didn't answer the clinic's call and didn't show up to look at a dead four-wheeler, his boss went to the house. The porch light was off. The door was locked. Through the front window, you could see a neat room. Mug on the table, coat on a hook. Tools lined in a row on a shelf like he was showing them off. His snowmobile was outside, iced over. No one could remember hearing it start overnight. People fanned out along the route from the rec hall to Rowan's place. The sky was that deep blue you get at noon when it's still not really day. They checked behind wood piles and oil tanks under porches out toward the creek. The snow was untouched apart from the lines they made themselves. No marks, no drag, no stumble. Just nothing between point A and the place he should have been. The RCMP flew in from Rankin. They asked the questions you always ask. Was he drinking? Was he depressed? Did he talk about leaving? The answer to all of that was no. They said maybe he'd walked out past town and got turned around. People who lived there didn't like that answer. You don't forget where you are in Calic Bay. The town smells like fuel and wood smoke. You can hear dogs from one end to the other. Rowan knew those sounds with his eyes closed. 6 weeks later, almost to the day, someone else went missing. Her name was Amaya LaRoque. She was 33, a nurse practitioner who flew in once a week and slept in the apartment above the co-op. She was steady and soft-spoken, the type who could put a needle in your arm and keep you talking about your tomato plants the whole time. On January 20th, 2017, she finished up at the clinic around 7, told the co-op manager she'd be upstairs working on charts, and went up the exterior stairs with her duffel. A weak halo shone in the snow from the stairlight, and her boots made a simple up and down pattern on the steps. The manager locked the store at 8 and headed home. The pilot came early the next morning. He waited. When she didn't come down, the manager let himself in with the spare key. Amaya's bag was at the door. Her parka and boots were gone. The kettle on the stove was half full. The bed was made. The deadbolt on the inside was thrown. Fresh snow had fallen after midnight. No tracks on the metal stairs. No prints in the lot below. The inside lock didn't make sense. Someone said maybe she left before the snow, met someone, and didn't come back. But you had to explain the deadbolt and the simple truth that nothing about that room looked like rushing or carelessness. It looked like a person who set their things in order and stepped out through a door no one else could see. The RCMP came again. They stayed longer. They walked every building. They sat in the council office and filled pages. The official line was the same. People wander, people make plans they don't tell their neighbors. Weather erases evidence. People nodded because what else do you do while you're being told that your town didn't see what it saw? When you live that far north, the light comes back in a slow drip. In late February, you can stand outdoors at dinner and see your breath in a brighter shade. March is when the sun starts clearing the horizon for real. On March 5th, just after the sky turned from black to blue, the third disappearance landed like a hit everyone had braced for, but still weren't ready to take. Nico Celine worked at the fuel depot. 26, quiet. The kind of person who finished a job even if the cold was biting through layers. He shared a small trailer at the very north edge of town with a cousin who flew medevacs. The cousin was out that week. Nico finished his shift at 4 on March 4th. A co-worker saw him walking toward the trailer, hood up, hands in his pockets. In the morning, he didn't show. His supervisor went to the trailer and found the door unlocked. Inside, almost everything said, "Regular evening." Work clothes folded on the end of the bed. A half-eaten bowl of soup still a little covered in film on the table. The TV throwing static because the satellite had cut out. The bathroom mirror fogged with old steam. Someone had written a single thing across the glass with a fingertip. Not 3. Not a word at all. Just 3 marks, each the length of a finger, clear tracks through the fog. If someone had meant to count in a way that was hard to deny, that's how they would have done it. The RCMP called in more help. A small team with experience in cold weather searches came, along with a profiler out of Yellowknife, who wore city boots that squeaked. They built charts and asked about patterns, and whether Rowan and Amaya and Nico had enemies. The answers, the real ones, were simple. No, no, and no. If anything connected them, it was that they were ordinary and useful and not likely to run. A woman named Marit, 60, hair like iron wool, ran the post office, came to the detachment with a bundle of old paper. She said she didn't want to be the person who kept quiet. 30 years before, she said, a winter had run the same way. 1986 into 1987, December. Late January, early March, 3 gone. No tracks, no answers. She'd kept the clippings because sometimes you hold on to proof that a thing wasn't a dream. The constable on the desk didn't want to hear it, but he took the papers anyway. He made calls. In a day, he had confirmation. The files were still open and still empty. Names from a generation earlier. The dates lined up in a neat, cold way. 6 weeks between the first and the second. 6 between the second and the third. A 30-year gap. People in town started marking calendars without meaning to. Theories grow fast in a place where the wind keeps you indoors. Some people said a person was doing it. That's where most minds go first, because people can be stopped. And stopping something is easier to carry around than the idea that you're living beside a hole in the world. Others said it was the land itself, that there are pockets in the tundra where a person can fall without falling, and once you've gone through, that's that. A few folks used bigger words, cult, trafficking, organized, but those words felt foreign in a town that runs on debt paid in favors and diesel. They tried to make the details fit anything simple. The locked door above the co-op with the deadbolt thrown from the inside. The lack of tracks to Rowan's place in perfect new snow. The 3 marks on a fogged mirror in a trailer where the TV hummed and the soup hadn't crusted over. Nothing behaved the way a normal story behaves. 2 more things happened that most people don't know. A man who lived close to the school woke to frost on the inside of his bedroom window and found the same 3 marks drawn into it. He moved to Iqaluit within the week. He told everyone it was for work. A woman in a house by the bay found a thuds scratched into the inside of her shed door, down near the latch, like a reminder left for a hand that already knew where to reach. She lasted 2 more days, and then went south to live with a sister. No one tried hard to talk either of them into staying. Spring comes to Calic Bay with a mess. Snow slumps into gray piles. The road turns to ruts. People drag mats outside and beat them. Folks looked around and realized 6 weeks had passed again, then 12, then 20. No 4th person was gone. The count stopped at 3 the way it had the last time. If the town had been holding its breath, you could hear the exhale in the clatter of dishes and the sound of kids playing on the packed snow behind the school. No one ever found Rowan or Amaya or Nico. No coats, no phones, no hats snagged on brush. The files are still files. The last entry in each says a version of "no further leads at this time." The official story sits somewhere between exposure and misadventure. People smile tight when they hear those words. You don't lose 3 people at even spaces and call it wandering. Calic Bay is smaller now. Few families left that spring. You can't blame them. Others stayed because leaving felt worse than staying. Because their grandparents had planted skiffs on that shoreline, and they know the tide by sound. Because dogs have to be fed either way. They work. They check on each other more than they say they do. They tape their door latches in winter to see if the tape breaks. They don't tell outsiders anything they don't have to. Every December, when the light goes for good and the first real cold lays down, someone in town starts keeping time on a quiet calendar. 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. It's not superstition if you have the dates on paper. People walk in pairs more. They keep their porch lights on whether they think it helps or not. When the sun starts to creep back in March and the count hasn't ticked over, shoulders drop an inch. There's a part of the story folks don't like to say out loud, but it sits there just the same. If the gap holds, if 30 winters is part of the shape, the next December is 2046. No one wants to think that far ahead. Some of the kids who were in kindergarten the year Rowan vanished will be the ones fixing generators and stocking the co-op shelves by then. It's a hard thought to put down. If you drive a skidoo past the old fuel depot on a windless day in late winter, you can sometimes see the white crust on the inside of the trailer's bathroom window, even though no one lives there now. If you stand too long, you'll feel foolish. If you breathe on the glass, the fog will bloom and clear in a way that makes you step back without deciding to. People from outside always want a clean ending. They want a culprit or a creature or at least a theory that tightens the string. Calic Bay doesn't have one. It has 3 names, 3 dates, and a town that learned to be a little quieter at night. When the dark piles up and the cold makes the stars feel close, folks sit near to one another and talk about anything else. The way the char ran heavy that year, the new nurse who laughs loud, the boy who can fix anything with baling wire and patience, and when the kettle whistles, someone always gets up to pour, because it's good to have your hands on something warm while you wait for the days to get longer. Arya Navar worked the front desk at the Tidal House Inn, the only hotel in the tiny coastal town of Cedar Vale, British Columbia. About 420 people lived there year-round, tucked between thick fir forest and a slate-gray inlet. Arya had graduated from the high school up the road, skipped the move to Vancouver like most of her classmates, and stayed. By 24, she knew everyone by name, which trucks belonged to which houses, and the way summer tour buses disappeared the second the rain came back. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Day after day, Arya checked in fishermen on layover, logging crews, and the occasional couple chasing stormy ocean views. You learn a lot at a front desk. How people talk when they're tired, how they act when they're lying, what a bad mood looks like from 20 feet away. Arya thought she was pretty good at reading people. On the night of September 12th, 2022, a man walked in who told her, without meaning to, that she wasn't as good as she thought. He arrived a little after 8, right when the lobby goes quiet, and the TV in the breakfast room hums to itself. He parked a slate blue hatchback that looked like a rental. He came inside with a small duffel and a laptop sleeve. Late 30s, clean-shaven, khakis and a navy polo. The picture of normal. "Evening," he said, polite and tired in the practiced way of someone who's been on the road too long. "Room for 2 nights?" "Sure," Arya said. "ID and a card?" He slid a Washington state driver's license under the plexi. The name read Grant Halverson. The face matched the man in front of her. Ordinary features. The kind you forget in a crowd. She typed in his info, swiped his card, and got a beep and a red message. Declined. Sorry, he said quickly. The kind of quick that tries to make you feel at ease. "My bank hates small towns. Can I try another?" "Of course." The second card approved. Arya handed him a key card for room 207, a standard queen on the inlet side. "Breakfast is 7 to 9. Lobby door locks at 11. Your room card will get you back in. Need anything? Dial 0. "Thanks," he said with that small, neutral smile people wear in lobbies and elevators. He went up the stairs. Arya watched him disappear on the turn and felt nothing. If you'd asked her, she would have said he seemed fine. The next morning he came down for scrambled eggs and toast, sat by the window, ate fast, checked his phone like everyone checks their phone. He nodded when Arya said good morning. He didn't try to chat. He took his coffee to go and vanished back upstairs. He checked out 2 days later, right on schedule, declined a printed receipt, and carried his 2 bags to the car. "Hope to pass through again," he said. "Safe drive," Arya said, and that would have been that. 4 days later, 2 RCMP officers walked into the lobby with rain still clinging to their uniforms. The woman introduced herself as Sergeant Saskia Moreau and asked who had been working the front desk the evening of September 12th. "I was," Arya said, every muscle waking up a little. "Do you remember checking in a guest named Grant Halverson?" Arya pulled the file, heart thudding for no good reason. "Yes, 2 nights. Room 207. He checked out on the 14th. "Can you describe him?" Moreau asked. "Anything you remember?" Arya gave them the usual, khakis and polo, late 30s, clean-shaven, drove a slate blue hatchback, quiet, polite. The declined card, how he never stood out. Moreau and her partner, Constable Jared Singh, traded a look Arya didn't like. Then Moreau said, "The person who checked in under the name Grant Halverson was not Grant Halverson. His real name is Rowan Kincaid. He's wanted in Washington and Oregon for 3 homicides. The real Halverson was found deceased outside Tacoma in July. His wallet and a handful of IDs were missing." For a second, Arya didn't understand the words. The lobby seemed to lift off its bolts. Same smell of coffee, same sun-bleached brochures. But everything tilted. She had stood 3 feet from a man the news called a killer. She'd smiled at him. She'd handed him a key. "We'd like to process room 207, Moreau said gently. "And anything he touched in the lobby, if that's okay." Arya nodded and sat down because her legs weren't interested in standing. The officers took a portable kit upstairs. For 2 hours, Arya listened to the muffled work of evidence bags and camera clicks, and the low murmur of professionals naming ordinary things. Bedding, hair, a single fiber like a stray thread of meaning. When they came back, Moreau's face had changed from official to worried. "We found maps," she said, "and notes. Cedarvale street names, circled addresses, handwritten routines. He was watching people. Planning something." "Who?" Arya asked, even before her stomach told her the answer. Moreau hesitated. "One of the marked addresses is yours." A pen mark on a printed map flashed through Arya's mind, brighter than any warning. Her little rental on Alder Street, second from the corner. She thought of the porch light with the loose bulb, the way she kicked the door when her hands were full. The routine she'd had since she was 18, early shift, home by 4, a walk by the water when it wasn't blowing sideways. She remembered the note next to her circled address in Moreau's photo. "Works mornings. Lives alone. Why did he leave?" Arya asked. "Because the alternative was to picture a version of the week where he didn't." "We don't know," Moreau said. The decline on that first card might have spooked him. Sometimes they move when anything feels off. He checked out clean. Cameras got the car headed south. That was the last we have of him. They gave Arya a card with a number that rang 24/7 and a list of practical steps. Change your locks, add a camera, vary your route, don't walk alone after dark. The advice felt both sane and like trying to hold the tide back with paper. After they left, Arya stood behind the counter and looked at her hands. There was nothing to see. That was the worst part. She kept replaying the check-in, desperate to spot a moment she'd missed. A flicker in his eyes, a tremor in his voice, some small alarm bell. There hadn't been one. He had been exactly what he wanted the world to see. A man not worth remembering. News traveled. The Tidal House staff heard first, then half the town by nightfall. For a week, Arya couldn't set a mug on the counter without someone leaning in to say they were glad she was okay. Or to ask what he looked like. Or to confess they'd seen a man like that at the co-op once and hadn't thought anything of it. Arya said thanks and I'm fine and I don't really remember. She went home and replaced her deadbolt with a better one and put a camera over her steps. She moved to day shifts. She pretended that fixed the part of her that now listened for footsteps every time water hissed in the shower. There were no updates. The RCMP looped in the FBI. The name Rowan Kincaid turned up in scattered tips and dead ends. The hatchback was a rental tied to a stolen identity, tied to 3 others tied to nothing at all. He was a man made of blanks. Every new guest after that felt like a test. Arya watched hands and eyes, listened for tremors, tracked patterns without meaning to. Friendly middle-aged couple from Kamloops? Fine. Contractor crew with steel-toed boots and jokes too loud for the lobby? Fine. Quiet guy with a baseball cap pulled low? Fine. And also not fine, because how do you tell? One afternoon, she caught herself staring at a woman signing a receipt and felt ridiculous. The woman looked up with an awkward smile. The look people give when they're being watched and don't know why. Arya smiled back and hated the new edge in her own heart, the way fear had redrawn the map of a place she'd always loved. A month later, Sergeant Moreau called. "Just checking in," she said, and the words landed like a hand on a shoulder. "Anything unusual?" "No," Arya said. "No, and thank you. We're still working it," Moreau said. "I know that doesn't help much. It wasn't nothing." Arya learned to measure comfort in smaller units. On the anniversary, 1 year exactly, she drove her same little car past the Tidal House on her day off and parked by the breakwater. A rain squall pushed across the inlet, a gray curtain you could watch walk. She thought about the man with the borrowed name, about the ordinary way he had stood at her counter, about the map with her address circled. She thought about how close nothing happened can sit to something you don't come back from. People told her she was brave for staying. She didn't feel brave. She felt changed. The world hadn't grown fangs. It had always had them. She just finally saw how well they could hide behind a smile and a receipt and a key card that clicks green. Sometimes a new clerk asked her how to spot a bad guest. Arya told them the only honest thing she knew now. Trust your skin, she'd say. If something in you goes quiet or tight, don't argue with it. Make the call. Don't need proof before you ask for help. They'd nod because that sounded like advice. She'd add softer, also, don't punish yourself for not seeing what wasn't there to see. Arya still lives in Cedar Vale. The camera over her steps blinks a blue dot. She keeps pepper spray in her jacket, and a habit of telling friends where she's going and when she'll be back. She has learned the names of fear that are useful, and the ones that are not. She has learned to hold a key card to the light, and remember that sometimes monsters look exactly like people you won't remember tomorrow. If you ask her what changed the most, she'll say this. She stopped assuming danger wears a sign. Some nights when the lobby is quiet and rain threads between the lights in the parking lot, she watches the door open and a stranger step in. She smiles because that is the job. She pays attention because that is the lesson. And when her phone buzzes with a number she doesn't know, she answers on the first ring. On the coast of Labrador, where the highway dissolves into gravel and fog, the night shift at a fuel stop buys you every kind of silence. There's the soft hiss of the bay at high tide, the click of the pump relays, the long heavy pauses between headlights. Noah Whitaker had learned them all. He was 29, saving every dollar to buy a used longliner, and 3 years on overnights at the Seabird Bay Fuel and Supply had put him within reach. The depot was a squat cinder block box at the end of town, the last bright square of glass before 50 miles of dark road and barrens. Population 300 and change. A cannery, a wharf, a church, 2 bars that pretended to close at midnight and didn't. Noah worked alone from 10 to 6, 5 nights a week. He liked the quiet until the night that taught him how a sound can split you in two. It was just past midnight on October 17th, 2020. Wind off the water, a wet, steady rain that hissed when it met the sodium lights. Noah sat behind the counter with a cracked paperback and coffee that tasted like a dare. Headlights rolled out of the fog and made a white wall on the pumps. An older cargo van glided in, plain white, unmarked, the kind contractors drive before they add a logo. The back had no windows. The suspension sat low like it was hauling tile or tools or something heavier. The driver stepped out. 40s maybe, with that lived-outside look men get from weather and work. Dark rain jacket, jeans. He didn't move like a drunk fisherman or a jittery kid. He moved like a man with a plan. He came inside, nodding once. 2 energy drinks from the cooler, a bag of beef jerky. Exact change laid neat on the counter. "Pump 2, he said. His voice was flat, courteous, already leaving. Noah flipped the switch. Through the glass, Noah watched him lift the nozzle, stand in the rain, and fill the tank without looking around. Nothing about it should have felt wrong. But the van's rear end sagged low. The guy never glanced at the price, never shifted his weight. Some customers look like they want you to see them. This man didn't want to be seen at all. When the pump clicked, the driver hung the nozzle, walked to the door, and then paused, like a thought caught his shoulder. He turned and looked straight through the window. His eyes made Noah think of tide gauges. Not cold, just measuring. He got in the van and started the engine. Noah waited for the taillights to move. They didn't. The brake lamps glowed red in the rain, the exhaust wavered, but the van sat. A minute bled out. Then another. The man's silhouette didn't shift. Noah felt his pulse go thin and fast. He told himself to go back to the paperback, to the coffee, to the small world of receipts and routine. He didn't move. That's when he heard it, 3 heavy thumps spaced like words. Metal on the inside of metal. Pause. 3 more. Not cargo shifting. Not the pump, a rhythm. Someone telling whoever could hear, "I am here." Noah pushed through the door into the rain. "Everything all right?" he called. The driver rolled his window a third of the way. Rain stitched the gap. "Fine," he said, polite again. "Just checking my map." "That noise," Noah said. "Sounds like something loose." "Fuel cut off," the man said, almost smiling. "Or raccoon on your roof." Seabird Bay raccoons didn't thump like fists. "You need me to—" Noah began. The man's hands tightened on the wheel. Not fear, not anger. Calculation, same as before. He waited Noah out like a patient with a secret. The thumps came again, 3 a breath. 3, deliberate, close. Someone had timed their hope to a pattern. Noah stepped back under the awning, phone in hand. The nearest RCMP detachment was 45 minutes on a dry road. Tonight it would be longer. He dialed anyway. The driver saw the phone, and whatever math he'd been doing ended. The van jolted into reverse, tires shrieking on wet pavement, slewed around the pump island and shot for the road. Noah lunged out into the rain to read the plate, but water and glare turned letters into ghosts. "White panel van," he told the dispatcher. Headed north toward Lark Harbor. No rear windows. Older model. Driver. Average height, average build, average face. The kind you forget on purpose because remembering hurts. "Stay inside," the dispatcher said. "We're sending a unit." By the time the cruiser's lights washed the pumps an hour later, the van was part of the road. Noah told the constable everything twice. How the man spoke, how he didn't, the way the brake lights burned. The sound with spaces like breath in between. It could have been cargo, the constable said. Pen careful over a damp notepad. People move odd stuff. Then why run? Noah asked. The constable looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I'll put the alert out." 3 days later, the phone on Noah's nightstand buzzed him out of a half-dream. They'd found the van, the constable said, abandoned on a logging road north of town. Wheels sunk to the rims in mud. Rain making metal into mirrors. The cargo area had been bleached. Luminol lit the floor like a planetarium. They were swabbing for DNA. They asked Noah to come in for a more detailed statement and sit with a sketch artist. He went. He tried to remember the man into sharpness, hair dark, going gray at the temples. Jaw like most jaws. No scar, no tattoo, no hook for memory to hold. The artist drew a face you could staple over 1,000 census forms and never be wrong. The samples came back weeks later. The blood belonged to a 33-year-old accountant from St. John's named Maya Ortiz, missing 2 weeks before the van rolled under Noah's lights. She'd left her office one evening and didn't reach her car. Cameras showed nothing helpful. Her body was never found. The investigation kept turning but didn't move. No prints matched. No plates led home. The van had been bought for cash 2 owners back and shuffled through hands until it didn't have a story. The man didn't show up on local footage except for the seconds under Noah's lights, and even there, his face was a blur of rain. Noah lasted another month at Seabird Bay Fuel and Supply. He sat behind the glass and watched rain become snow, and the pumps turn over and the new coffee taste like the old coffee. Every headlight made him think of brake lights. Every white van on the highway became a ghost of one that was already gone. He quit, moved inland to a construction job, and told himself he would rebuild until the ache in his stomach became a thing he could name. But grief has a way of choosing you, even when you didn't know the person you lost. He thought about the sound in 100 moments. At a red light, at a lunch table, standing in a dusty sunbeam with a hammer in his hand. 3 thuds. Pause. 3. A grammar for the last seconds of hope. He replayed the night when he should have been sleeping, the way his hand hovered over the phone. The 12 seconds when he tried to logic himself out of what his bones already knew. The slow, measuring look the driver gave him. He kept asking a question you can hurt yourself with. If I had moved faster. When the town's fishermen gathered in the bar months later and the subject swam to the surface like something hooked by accident, they had their own questions. How many stations like Noah's sit alone at the edge of a map? How many night clerks have heard a noise and talked themselves back to a chair? How many women never got to make a last sound because no one was close enough to hear? The constable called twice more that year. The first time to say they'd pushed the case to a major crimes unit. The second time to say they were still working it. The shape of things you can't fix starts to look like wallpaper if you stare long enough. Noah tried not to stare. He stopped by the depot one evening in late spring when the ice had finally quit the bay. The new night clerk was young, a face like the edge of a summer. Noah didn't tell him about the van. He told him the thing he wished someone had told him from the start. If it feels off, he said, it is. That a policy? The clerk asked, smiling like this was the wisdom of an older man in a movie. It's a rule, Noah said. Make the call. You don't need the reason first. On the anniversaries, he doesn't count years. He counts choices. He writes a check to a fund he wouldn't have known existed, if not for a van that stopped too long at his pumps. He carries a picture of Maya Ortiz clipped from a news story in his wallet behind the permit and the spare key. It's not a penance, it's a weight, and some weights keep you from floating away. Once, months after, he woke to rain on a metal roof in a room he was renting above a mechanic's shop. The sound gathered in runs and pauses. For a second, his heart misheard the guttering. 3, wait, 3. And he was at the glass again, watching brake lights burn. He sat up and put his feet on the floor and let the truth of walls and windows remind him where he was. Then he listened hard. If anyone had needed him, he wanted to be the kind of person who could move without arguing with himself. There isn't an ending with a bow. The Man in the Rain is still a sketch in a drawer. The van was sold at auction to be stripped of anything clean and anything not. The depot kept its bad coffee and its yellow light. Seabird Bay kept its weather and its fish and the way fog blurs your world into the size of a parking lot. The road still runs north into a darkness that is just darkness unless it isn't. Some nights, long after he should, Noah turns on the radio and drives the stretch past the depot. He doesn't know what he's hoping for. Maybe to be useful again. Maybe to hear the world the way he hears it now. For patterns, for pauses, for the small, simple grammar of rescue. If he ever comes on a van sitting too still under the lamps, he knows what he'll do. Lights up, phone out. Walk out into the rain before a thought can tap his shoulder and ask him to wait. He'll call first and ask questions second. He'll stand in the sound and make himself part of it. Because some nights will give you only one job. Be the person who hears 3 thuds and believes them.